There we go. Okay. You should be seeing a brown screen, right? Everybody? Yeah. Okay, this is our trip to Iowa from last year. If you're seeing your words covered up on your right screen, as I am, there are some little buttons at the top that you can play with to see if you can get them somewhere else, to go someplace else. Okay, mine's just going to 1. All right, if you can see everything, because some of the titles will be up in that corner. There was one day that I forgot my phone, so you'll see some pictures from Judy Miner on one of those days, and I'll tell you otherwise. Most of them are from me, a few from the internet, but mostly are from my camera phone. So we had a trip to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which was actually the second part of a trip. Part of our group went to Madison, Wisconsin first for the first week, and I did not do that. I joined them for the second week in Cedar Rapids. So the folks from Madison brought the people who had attended Madison to Dubuque, Iowa, which is kind of a halfway point. So we had our welcome party at this little park, at Eagle Point Park, which overlooked the Mississippi. And it was just beginning to rain, so it was nice that we had a sheltered spot. It was almost like a covered bridge kind of room. It was an odd room. But we did have a catered lunch, and Larry Nelson introduced us and welcomed us to Iowa. And after lunch, the rain had just about stopped, so we got out on the banks of the Mississippi and had a look to see Dubuque down below us. And from here, you can see Wisconsin to your right across the river. To your left, Illinois to your right across the river, and Iowa where we are standing. And of course, there are some locks along there. There is a lot of barge traffic along the Mississippi. And also some beautiful flowers along there. We were pleased to see so many of the monarchs that were migrating through at that time. And we also were able to meet the people who had come from Japan, from Aichi Club. And here are a couple of them, and they joined us for the second week. Of course, along the Mississippi was a good place for doing your photo ops. Marsha Walker is from Missouri, and she also joined us for this second week. So we saw a little bit of Dubuque, Iowa, as long as we were there. And my host and I, Judy Miner, visited down along the riverfront, first of all. And you see the building in the background, which is now where that little pub was, Star Brewing. But there are also some other things along the Riverwalk. You see just directly in the back of the picture, there's a shot tower. And if you don't know what a shot tower is, I didn't know myself. It's one of the last of its kind, and it is on the list of historic, the National Register of Historic Places. Well, a shot tower makes just what it sounds like. It makes lead shot for guns. And what they do is they put molten lead up in the top and drop it down into a tub of water. And in doing so, it splits into tiny little pieces, and that's your shot, and it cools it off. So that's a shot tower. Who knew? The real thing to see, though, in Dubuque is St. Luke's Methodist Church. And this is one of the Tiffany glass windows that church is particularly noted for. It's called the Angel Among the Lilies, and the girl in the picture was the portrait of the patrons who donated, patron's daughter who had died. St. Luke's was founded in 1833. There were a couple of churches there before that. You know, the Germans had come, and the Bohemians and the English, and all to the Midwest in the 1800s. And there were a couple of other smaller St. Luke's church, starting with a log cabin. This one was completed in 1897. But I said it's particularly famous for its Tiffany glass windows. And you see them along the right side of this picture, and also for the pipe organ. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. This church is especially interesting for me because the lighting fixtures in it were made by my family business's company in Wisconsin. If you look around your churches, you might see a lot more of them. We visited another church that had them in as well. And so that was kind of fun to see the company that my father started, that my brother then ran, and now my nephew, his son, to see our lighting fixtures in this, and they're all over the United States. And you see the angel back here in this window that was on our title page for this. So what is it about Tiffany windows that makes them special? The thing is, if you look closely at a Tiffany window, you can see that they are painted within the glass before they even put the glass into these frames. This is the organ that was brought up in pieces by a train and then by barge up the Mississippi. So let me just give you a little preview of or close-up rather, of the Good Samaritan. You can see that each of the pieces also is shaded in color, which makes for really beautiful, beautiful pictures. And so they're very special. Another interesting thing about Dubuque is that there is this high bluff above it. And this neighborhood up above was the home just beyond my standing of the Senator J.K. Graves had a beautiful home up here, and it was a very Tony neighborhood, but he didn't like climbing all the steps up here. So he built this elevator, the shortest little funicular of the 3-gauge, narrowest and steepest railroad in the world, it's called. And it didn't last very long. It had to be replaced by a cable car type thing, which was a little further down the line, 1882. But then he started charging in 1876 a nickel if other people in the neighborhood wanted to ride it. One of the other beautiful buildings in downtown Dubuque is the Dubuque Courthouse, as you see in the middle. And it was built in 1891 to replace an earlier building, also on the Register of Historical Places. And it was designed by Friedland Heer, and you're going to see that architect name as we move along because he's done a lot of things in this area. It's called Beaux-Art Architecture, which means, wow, is it fancy, as far as I can tell. It kind of reminds me of the courthouses that we have in Texas, the beautiful courthouses that are all individual. This has a 5-store glass elevator inside of it that's 190 feet tall, and this gold dome on it and the statue on top of it. So it's a very fancy building. Nearby in Dyersville, which we visited from Dubuque on our way to Cedar Rapids, we visited another beautiful church called the Basilica of St. Francis Xavier. St. Francis Xavier was a missionary to India. And so this figures in the building of the church, as you will see. It's a Catholic basilica. Now, basilica is not the same as a cathedral. The cathedral is a seat of the bishop of the diocese, but this is not the seat of the bishop. But a basilica is a place where the Pope would come if he visits in the area, and it has to be built to very specific specifications, which of course this one was. There were several earlier versions of it, of course, but as the population of Germans increased during the 1800s, this beautiful church was built and was completed in 1889. And the construction is called Ruskinian Gothic Revival, whatever that means. And guess who built it? Our architect, who also built the courthouse in Dubuque, Friedland Heer and his son. It has 2 steeples, which are 212 feet tall, 14-foot crosses. This church will seat 1,000 people, which I found pretty amazing. The high altar is made of Italian marble and Mexican onyx, and it has a carved crucifix up above that's carved out of wood from one of the local farmers of butternut wood. And the organ, of course, is one of the beautiful organs that was brought in. And the rose window in the back, the architect designing it said, well, this is St. Francis Xavier, and he was a missionary to India, so we want it to be about that. Well, there were Indians in the area, and so he made it about local Indians. So it does have Indian symbols in it, but not that India. And there are a couple of beautiful side altars as well as the main altar. This is the side altar for Mary, and there's also one for Joseph. And of course, beautiful windows, but not the Tiffany windows. Our second stop in Dyersville was the Field of Dreams. You may remember the movie. Let's see, let me find my notes about that. The movie was filmed in 1989, The Field of Dreams, and you remember it was with Kevin Costner, the farmer who built this Field of Dreams to have the old time baseball players come and play. And the property was bought of the Lansing family. However, the people who were making the film didn't like this area back here, so this part actually belonged to the neighbors because they wanted a clear view for shooting or something like that. You know how movie people are. So this was a contention after the movie was shot, and tourists started to come. Eventually, it was sold. They bought this property and eventually sold it to the Go Distance Baseball Company, which now owns that property and uses it just as a commercial tourist place. I understand there are games there every once in a while. And on the 25th birthday, they did have an anniversary game there, which featured Kevin Costner and some other people, and had about 12,000 fans that came out. They put up some temporary bleachers. They're supposed to put some up this summer for a Yankees-White Sox game, and that didn't happen. The Yankees begged off of that, so the St. Louis Cardinals said they would come and play, and they were building a stands for 8,000 people. But I don't know what's going to happen with that with the coronavirus now, but that would be the first major league game played in Iowa if that does come to pass. So here's a little map of where we're talking about, the area we're talking about. Madison's not far from Dubuque. Dubuque's not far from Cedar Rapids. And this is the little trek that we made. So we're on now to Cedar Rapids, which was our destination for the week. The big thing about Cedar Rapids is it flooded big time in 2008. And a lot of our touring through and visiting with these people had to do with this flood. And of course, this is something that is not something you want to see in your hometown. The downtown is next to the Cedar River, and it overflowed to the tune of over 31 feet, which is 19 feet above flood stage. All the downtown first floors were flooded, some even to the second floor. So they had some dams on it, but they didn't begin to help when the rains and the snows all started flowing into these rivers in June of 2008. So a lot of our touring then had to do with this flood. We did have a guide who was hired by the city to deal with this flooding, and he was the one who took us around and showed it to us. So a lot of it did focus on the flooding. This is an aerial view, or actually probably a view from the mountain above to where some of the things are. So City Hall and the other government buildings are on Mays Island, and of course that was flooded big time. We also saw some of the things in the downtown area, the Paramount Library, the Paramount Theater, the library, and the courthouse, the Newbo Market. This building down here, the Czech Museum, of course, was underwater, and this is what it looked like during the flood. As you can see, it was pretty bad. This is the Czech Museum. It was moved later on to this area over here and built up on a hill. They actually moved the whole building, but the whole first floor of it was ruined, and along with the displays. So as we went touring through Cedar Rapids, we came to Mount Trashmore, which is their landfill. And it was closed. They do have a bike track and have some bike races on it, but the caretaker was there, let us come up and get a bird's eye view of the top of the town and what it looked like from the top. So we did get a nice view from there. So all in all, this flooded about 10 square miles, 1,300 blocks. So it was a major, major flooding. We visited the aftermath of the flood at the Northwest Gateway Memorial Plaza, which is down on the level on the other side of the downtown area, the Northwest neighborhood. And that included a lot of homes, but as you see, here's how many homes there were in this area, but almost all of them are gone. It's mostly just grass now. There were floods in a couple since then. They found out where some of their weak spots were and have been able to correct those. So they hope that it's not going to happen again. So this was built as a memorial to the flooding, and this area shows how high the floodwaters came at this very place. So the water would have been at the top of this little monument right here. Again, another picture of what it looked like during the 2008 flood. This was the area that is the neighborhood that's no longer there. And some of our Japanese friends here along the river at this park. And we know those people. They're from here. So a little bit more about downtown. Cedar Rapids is the county seat, and there are some large industries here. The Sinclair is a big meat packing plant here. And also Quaker Oats and Cherry Burrell, which are big milling cereal millers. And one that you may have heard via Dallas, and that's the Collins Radio. You remember them? They were in Dallas, but it started here in Cedar Rapids with Collins Radio with 8 people. And so there are people who have some ties to Dallas. We had lunch after our tour at 350, which is the top floor of one of the high rises in the downtown area, and have some nice views from there. So Cedar Rapids is a small town, the second largest in the state of Iowa. Don't mind being the largest one. That metro area includes several small towns around, including Marion, which is the largest big town. We were surprised at some of the things that they plan to take us to, like the library and a university hospital. And we thought, okay, we'll see what that's like. So the library, of course, was one of the buildings that was flooded and is now built. This is their brand new one. And the reason they took us there was because it's won a bunch of architectural awards. And it's very ergonomic and green, and has all kinds of interesting things about it. So we did have a tour through it. All of the downstairs was flooded, which meant all of the adult books, the children's books, were on an upstairs floor, so they were saved. And they traded places, not opening the one that they were in, but a building farther away from the river. They traded with the owner of that building and tore that one down and built a new one, reopened in 2003. One of the interesting things they do in this library is to automate their book sorting. If you see this conveyor belt along here, the books come along and they're coded on the bottom. And when the reader reads them, they will just pop into one of those slots and into those bins to be taken where they need to go. There's lots of artwork in the building and lots of interactive things to do. And she's telling us now about the book club packets. If you're in a book club, you'll see that they have packaged books. Say your book is reading Jane Eyre next week. They will package 12 books to a bag, and if your book club comes in, you can all have books to read. And you don't either unlimited number of hours or days that you can keep them out till you're finished, which I think is a great idea. We ought to have that in our libraries. And the rooftop, which the guide was telling us about, is green on top, and it does a lot of wonderful things. It cleans the air, it helps cool the building, and provides habitat and so forth. So this building can be used for private events. There are also fun things in the library to do, particularly for kids, but then you never know. We stopped by the Nubo Market. I love the sign, "Chocolate's Nature's Waste for Making Up for Monday." I could live with that. And they've redone the plaza out front, which was completely demolished. The Paramount Theater is a really beautiful building. It was flooded too. You see that one of the chandeliers is Bohemian crystal. A lot of the people who moved to this area were of Czech descent or Bohemian. There's Bohemia and Moravia. And this is the Bohemian glass. So there's several beautiful chandeliers in this building and others around the city. This is one in another lobby. Ceiling downstairs in the theater, and this is the downstairs lobby where the restrooms are. We had a chance to go on stage and see what it would look like if you were performing there. The whole first floor was covered in water, and the Wurlitzer theater organ that was there landed up on the stage. It was completely torn loose, and it had just been remodeled. And so they had to replace the organ. But the building itself was fairly sound, and so they did renovate again in the interior. One of our Japanese ladies who could picture herself on the stage. One of my favorite places was the Czech Museum. Let me get a little drink here. So I said there, the Czechs had some beautiful artwork, not only the Bohemian crystal, but other kinds of arts and crafts. Here's our building, which was moved on rollers to a higher place. And as you're looking out the door, this is what it would look like now. It's still next to the freeway, but on the other side. And one of their beautiful chandeliers looking the other direction. Of course, there's a lot of history about the Czech Republic, which was at many times belonging to different countries. You see it here in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. It became Czechoslovakia after World War II, but Germany had part of it for a while. Poland had part of it. Hungary had part of it. Ukraine, Romania belonged to different people. It eventually split into Slovenia and the Czech Republic, or Czechia, as they call it over there. So there was a lot about their attempt to evade some of this, or escape from some of these wars that went on, grabbing power on their land. And so a lot of them did come to the United States or moved on. Quite a bit about the history. But my favorite thing about it was some of the craft things that they do, and the native dress, and the beautiful artwork they had, some of the Bohemian wood carving and different ceramics that they have. These I thought were just darling. You remember the photographer that would photograph your new baby in a little cup or in a flower or something? Well, they put their newborn babies in little bitty Czech costumes. Oh, they're not sweet. Look at this darling thing. So I thought they were just cute as they could be. The little violinist down here on the left, on the right, is just, he's ready to play. And while we were there, there was a guitar exhibit. I'm not sure if it's a permanent exhibit or not, but they began with the old lutes. This is the side view of this particular one, all the way through the very modern ones. And I found it to be a really interesting exhibit, since I'm a former musician, or still a patron of the music arts. And of course, beautiful, beautiful wood carving. And as we got into the more modern ones, they weren't all modern, weren't all wood. This is one made of silver on the right. And some that you have probably never seen before, nor have I. And some very modern ones. I love this one with the license plates. Isn't that cute? And this one's got all kinds of little skulls and things on it. My other favorite thing was the one on national dress. And I've been told they are not costumes, because a costume is something you wear if that's not who you are. But if you're a Czech, then this is your national dress. Same thing for our American Indian tribes. And this right here is on a pedestal that moves. Oh, good, my video is going to work. I hope you're able to see it working. Or you can see the costumes as they go by. Of course, me, I'm a folk dancer. I wanted to see them individually, so I do have pictures of every single one of them. So I'm going to go on and let you look at some of them individually, some of the beautiful dresses. And remember, this is before sewing machines. These are all handmade, hand-stitched, hand-embroidered, probably brought from the old country, a lot of them by grandma or whoever came. But I just love this kind of stuff, so you have to bear with me. If you're a Christmas tree or Christmas fanatic, their gift shop is to die for. They have all these beautiful glass ornaments and beautiful, beautiful things that you can buy. In-home dinners are always fun wherever we go visit and whenever we host people. At this particular one, of course, we had Japanese visitors as well with us. And our host for the evening was this lady on the right, Audrey, and her hobby was making these tamari balls. And they're done with balls and with yarn or thread on top of them. And of course, our Japanese lady who was there was familiar with them. She knew exactly who they were, Keiko. And this is my host and my host couple. And And the dinner that Marjorie made us, I'm sorry, that Audrey made us also was a really different from anything that I have been to in a dinner. And it was a tapas dinner. She did it all herself. And we had about 10 to 12 different items that she made, several courses. We'd finish one, she'd bring some more out. And everything was really delicious and really wonderful. All vegetarian, absolutely everything. Another day we went to the University of Iowa, which is actually part of the Cedar Rapids Club, not too far from there. We visited their Children's Health Center. And you see the picture I have up here is some children's art, because they have a huge budget for children's art for the Children's Hospital. And they're able to change out these displays that they have on the walls from time to time and use children's things to display all over. We also had a guided tour through here, a very interesting place, state of the art. This particular children's hospital is known for the invention of a brand new technique back in, I'm not even sure when, that treats a clubfoot. Instead of doing surgery, they have some ways of manipulating and doing massage on it, and then putting the foot in a cast and adjusting as it goes along, so they don't have to have surgery on their clubfoot. And this is still used to this day. On the top floor, it's called the press box, and all along the hospital are these windows looking out on the University of Iowa Stadium, which is right next to it. The university is there, the University Hospital is right there. And what they do at the press box, the kids can bring up their wheelchairs or their chairs, their parents can come in, and the hospital is then, that floor is closed off to other people during the football games. And they can watch the games from here. And the tradition has become, after the first quarter, that all the people who are here in the stands turn and face these windows, and they do the wave to the children watching. One of the other things in Iowa that I found interesting was the Grant Wood House. Now, Grant Wood was born just in rural Iowa, just near Cedar Rapids, but his father died and his mother moved when he was 4 to Cedar Rapids, which is where they lived. But he did teach at the University of Iowa, and he had a house, or a flat, I should say, in Iowa City, which we were able to see. This is his original boyhood town in Cedar Rapids. But he did live in Iowa City as well. On this top floor, not very inspiring, I guess, for a nationally known artist. So here are some replicas of him in his studio. You will recognize American Gothic. I'll say some more about that in a minute. So he lived in this little studio apartment upstairs. And these are all in museums now, of course, the originals. These little ladies here were the DAR group, and you notice the sour looks on their faces. He had a thing for Iowa ladies. And he featured a lot of the Iowa landscapes. This is the Ride of Paul Revere on that one. So he has this very modest little home. This is his kitchen and a little bathroom. What he did do in Cedar Rapids was this beautiful window in the Veterans Memorial, called the Veterans Memorial window. His sister, Nan, was the model for this, and it was finished in 1927. This window is 24 feet tall by 20 feet across. This super figure at the top, he had to make sure that when you looked at it, it wasn't dissolving into a point. So he got up on a ladder and made sure he was allowing for that in doing this stained glass. It's 16 feet tall, said to represent the Republic. And there's a mourning veil over the head of it, and her body is like floating in the clouds. So she holds the palm branch, which you can see in this hand, and the laurel wreath in the other. So down below are, remember this is 1927, are 6 wars that are represented for the veterans. This would be the Revolutionary War, starting, where's my cursor? The Revolutionary War, and they're in privates' costumes. The War of 1812, the Mexican War, the Civil War, Spanish-American War and the First World War. And after this was built, of course, we had some more wars, and some other monuments have been added to this Veterans Memorial building, which is on Mays Island in Cedar Rapids. For the Iwo Jima and for World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. Now this glass was supposed to be made at a glass company in St. Louis, but then when they found out how intricate all these pieces were, they said, no, I don't think so. So actually a company in Munich, Germany made this glass and shipped these panels back to the United States, and it took about 3 months. So during it took 2 years. The last 3 months of it, Grant Wood went to Munich to supervise the last part of it. And while he was in Europe, he did look at other kinds of painting that we were doing at that time, and decided to focus more on pictures that told a story. So as we saw in some of his pictures, they tend to tell a story. When he came back, it really had an effect on his painting from then on. There are more pictures in Cedar Rapids at Coe College. There's some. Coe College doesn't have an art gallery per se. These are in the library. You walk around the people who are studying, and they're just paintings all over the wall. Not all of them are his, of course, but they're Iowa artists and American artists. So here are the people who are in the painting. This is Grant Wood's sister, Nan. And this was their dentist, whom he got to pose for the picture, the American Gothic picture. And this is the house he found. I'm sorry, this should say Illinois. I meant to go back and correct this, and I forgot to do it. In Eldon, Illinois, he saw this house and he liked it. And you can see he's elongated that window just a little bit to make it look a little bit more religious. But he was inspired by this house and put his couple in front of the house. So our Iowa farmer in his overalls has got his jacket on. Maybe this is his religious symbol, I'm not sure. She's in her early American polka dot dress. But this is his most famous painting. It's now in the Art Institute in Chicago. He'd entered a contest there and won first place and won $300, which was a lot of money at that time. And it's still there at the Art Institute in Chicago. Another place we visited nearby was the Devonian Fossil Gorge and also the Raptor Center. So the Devonian Fossil Gorge is a place that's 375 million years old. This is 200 million years before dinosaurs, you can imagine. Didn't know about these. It's a riverbed. You know, we have our dinosaur tracks down at Dinosaur State Park, and they have pre-dinosaur fossils in this gorge. And this whole park is in a very nice area along a lake and river and meadows and big stream all through. We did a very, very quick stop to look at some of them. So some of these were uncovered in the flood of 2008 and some in other floods. And they are just full of fossils. You can pick them up. I mean, there are millions of them. If you go online, you'll see pictures that people have taken who have picnicked there and camped at this very nice park. Our next stop very close by was the Raptor Center. And this is the Iowa Raptor Project is what it is, and it's around Coralville Lake. And this Coralville Lake and all the area around it with the wetlands and fields and woods is a big migration area through the central US, and they have a lot of birds come through here in the spring and in the fall. And sometimes birds get injured, and this Raptor Center focuses on repairing or rehabilitating birds that are wounded, and if they're not able to fly and go back into the wild, they keep them there. Right now they have about 17 different birds, and they're all different kinds. So you can see some of them listed here with Judy. They have bald eagles, golden eagles, great horned owls, peregrine falcons, turkey vultures, kestrels, Harris hawks. So they are quite tame now for the people who work there. They also, in addition to instructing groups that come out there, they do monitor their winter population that winters there, and they look at habitat and nesting and what kind of habitat they need in the cities and migrating patterns and things like that. So it's a research center as well as an educational center for kids. And we ate at this lovely restaurant along the river in Coralville after that time there. One of the fun days we spent was at the Amish and Mennonite colonies in Kelowna. And the Kelowna Historical Society was established in 1969 to preserve some of the Amish and Mennonite heritage that these people brought to this area of Iowa. And this is our introduction to Kelowna with coffee and donuts. One of the founders of this was a guy named Glenn Wall, W-A-H-L, and he wanted to save the depot. This was an old train depot, and so he donated land that this historical village is now on. So the Mennonite Museum was built here. And you'll see the train depot, which was the first building that was moved here, and there are now 12 buildings as well. So we had a little introduction to it in the visitor center, and then got to see some of the kinds of homes that the Amish and Mennonites were living in, and a lot of them brought me back to my grandmother on my mother's side, who lived, had a lot of this kind of stuff. She had a wood burning stove and an iron on it. I have chairs very much like these that are about 100 years old. Some that she gave me that have a rounded back, and then more that I bought that are look more like this. The beds, of course, were strung. They didn't have the kind of mattresses that we have, but they had to stretch these every night to keep that tight, or you would sag down to the ground. So this is where the term sleep tight came from. You probably already knew that. This is more like my grandma's wood stove. And you see they have the washboard and the bathtub. And of course, that's this Saturday night bathtub. The organ is very much like an organ my husband's grandmother had, and didn't leave it to us. She left it to another child who was an organist. Another grandma had a pot-bellied stove in her living room, much like that one. Quilting was a big thing. If you had a shower for a new baby or a new child, new person in the neighborhood, you might have a little quilting party and everyone would sign their names on a quilt. Of course, some of these are really gorgeous. The little trundle bed underneath, the pots. This I was interested not only for the bathtub, but for the family history. I've been working on Ancestry and I'm trying, how do you put all these ancestors? One of my ancestors, now I'm up to 783 people in it. You can't fit it on one place, but this person did make an effort to put all their family tree on. And I'm not even sure how many generations there are. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we get down into these, and I'm not sure how many there are. There may be 16. Here's another way to put your family on family tree in with all the children and all their generations. And of course, this is always a work in progress because people keep marrying and having babies. You know why I have the hat on. I'm known for the hat that looks like this in a quilt pattern. This mural extended all the way across it. You might have seen a little piece of it with the piece where we were getting our introduction, but a mural that's maybe 20 feet long that shows the Amish in their clothes, the very old style clothes, the hats, the kinds of houses they had, the horse and buggy in the back, and more going down the other end of it, what life would have been in rural Iowa back in the old days. My ex-husband was interested in tools. These are planes and some woodworking tools. This particular one, we found, my mother liked old antique stuff too. She had an early American house. We found one of these. This is only the 4th one I've ever seen. I've come to find out they're quite rare. So if you see one, hang on to it. You may not even know what it's for. I didn't know what it was for until I saw one in a museum. The only place I've ever seen them is the 3 in the museum. This is the 4th one, the 3rd one in a museum. But the first one I saw was one we bought my mother. The roadside antique place in Arkansas on our way up to Wisconsin one summer when our kids were little. And she hung it on the wall. And then later on, as I said, we began to find out how rare these were. What they were for. They were to measure a wagon wheel. It's got inches along there, and you would measure a wagon wheel to have it all the same size, I suppose. So, but they're quite rare. And when we found this out, my mother said, "Oh, I'll leave this to you when I die," because she knew my husband liked all these old tools by then. And of course, it was gone. Never saw it again, which was a shame. And of course, there are all kinds of other things that you can collect besides quilts. You can collect the Hummel figures. A lot of grandmas have those kinds of things. And quilting was a big thing. If you like the State Fair, you like the quilts. These are beautiful quilts. I learned to sew on a sewing machine like this. It was my mother's. I bet a lot of you did. Well, women. Some of the clothes of the Amish and some toys. And here we come to the village, and the village, as I say, has 12 buildings. This building on my right, the reddish building, was the first one there, the train station. So this is a layout of the village. This was the train station right here. And there, I went through some of these buildings. This was some of the exhibit buildings that we saw there. But they do have a lot of different kinds of buildings. They have some that I did not go through due to time. They have a welcome center, a church, a wash house. This is where you did your wash. Of course, you didn't have electricity. A well house, the Wall House, W-A-H-L, which is their big Victorian house, which would be, I don't really see it. It's this one down here in the corner. The museum, the log house, a schoolhouse, post office, general store, train depot, a loom house, Grandpa's house, which would be a little house that you put next door to your house once your folks retired, the buggy shop, a line shaft shop, the water tank and windmill. And I found out that the water tanks had to be spaced along the railroad. So the coal burning trains came along, they had to stop and put more water in order to make steam for these steam engines. So the towns grew up around the water tanks. And in fact, there was a water tank here near Kelowna, and that's why this town got started there. It's an agricultural museum, and the Mennonite Museum, which we went through, the Quilt and Textile Library. So you might ask, well, I'm going to go through these first, and we'll look about, you might ask. So the train depot was the first one. They paid $50 for it from the railroad to move it there. A couple of different churches. One turned into an antique shop. And the schoolhouse. And I had desks just like that when I went to school too. The Snyder Log House from 1842. Looking down the street. So also on the day that we were there was auction day, where they have cattle and hay. We were there on a Thursday, so they were auctioning cattle and hay. And of course, Edward is out chatting up the farmers who are in to sell some hay or buying hay. I'm not sure which was the case in this case. You see there are different ways to bale hay. And a young woman who was, she said she was buying it for her rescue animals. So she has a pony and a cow and a goat, and I'm not sure what else. So we went into the auction barn, and I really messed up my video on this. If you blink, you're going to miss it, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. The cow comes in this door, and it actually doesn't take very long to auction off a cow. If you count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bang. Next one, 1, 2, they go pretty quick, and you just raise your finger and you bought yourself a cow. So that, I'm sorry, that's as long as my video lasted. So I messed that one up. We got Paula waiting for us for lunch. And our next stop, last stop, was our free day when I went to the Herbert Hoover Home and Museum in West Branch. Again, not very far. Now, Herbert Hoover has gotten a bad name, a bad rap. This is his historical library and home. And you see some of the places where he was a geological engineer around the world. He was always a fisherman. He loved to fish. As a little guy, his parents died quite young. He was farmed out to an uncle in Oregon. They were Quakers, his uncle as well. And so he only went to school, at the Quaker school, until age 13. But he was born near Cedar Rapids. And this was at home, of course, when he became a little more famous. He was an architect, an engineer, a geologist, an organizer. He loved to organize things and get things going, and a good thinker. He's a humanitarian. You'll hear more about what he did there. His wife was also very interested in children's rights, and these are some ideals for children that I think could still serve us well today. He did mining after well, let me tell you about it when he went to college too. So he never went to high school, but he did take classes at night while he was working for his uncle after he dropped out of school at age 13. And so Stanford University was opening up just at the time he was ready to go to college. And so he went to college as the first student. He wasn't very good. He didn't pass any of his entrance exams except for mathematics. He was pretty good in that. But he liked geology, and so he became a geologist and ended up being a mining engineer and worked for a British company in Australia. And worldwide, he ended up working all over. So the museum has some of his artifacts from his mining career in Australia and in other places. The company that he worked for in Australia, he suggested that they buy a gold mine, a defunct one. It turned out that it was a real winner, and it now produces 50% of all the gold in Australia. After his mining career, very successful mining career, he became a millionaire by doing that. And after about 10 years, he got into politics. And after a while, he was a Republican. He became Secretary of Commerce and did a lot of things. I said he liked to organize stuff. So one of the things he did was get our highway systems and signs in order. You think about all the things that we just assume everybody has, but all roads were numbered different, all the traffic signs were different all over the country. So he standardized everything so that you can drive from one place to another, and all the signage and road and laws are going to be the same. He was a big promoter of different kinds of projects, including the Hoover Dam. He married Lou Henry, who was also the first woman to graduate from Stanford. She was in his first class and the first woman to go there. They had 2 sons, and she was very smart and very active in her own right. She was an independent girl. Sooner or later, she's sure to meet a spirit equally as independent as her own. And then there's a clash of arms ending in mortal combat, or they unite their forces and with combined strength go forth to meet the world. Nice, must be nice. Find the one just perfect for you. So he became active in politics and easily won his election in 1928. And of course, Hoover is really known for being the Depression president who couldn't get it together during the Depression. He and Coolidge could see the Depression coming, but they really didn't make good decisions as to how to handle it. Just very much like we see now. They predicted this Wall Street crash, but could see these unsafe financial practices, and they did get rid of some of those. He did get rid of some of those when he was president, but he did do some things that didn't work very well and got the blame for it, of course. So here are some of the things you probably didn't ever know about Hoover, what some of the things that he accomplished. He was a great humanitarian. He coordinated the relief efforts first in getting people out of China during the Boxer Rebellion, then during World War I. Americans who were trapped there, Belgian relief when they were occupied by the German forces, and post-World War I to get World War I survivors back on their feet again. These different projects that he sponsored and promoted, standardization, not just of highways, but all kinds of things. So if you're looking for standard parts now, that's due to Hoover, who had all these things standardized. Vehicles, runway lights, traffic laws, tire. We didn't have all this stuff then. Isn't that amazing? He was a big conservationist. His When he was president, the national parks grew by 40%, 3 million acres of land to the national parks. Betterment of life of getting long-term home mortgages. We didn't have that until then. The 8-hour workday, child health and protection laws, fair wage and benefits and overtime for government projects. Of course, the rest of it came much later. Federal Farm Board, prison reform, Reconstruction Finance Corporation was the one thing he did do during the Depression that helped refinance loans for people who were going under, international policies, and he was instrumental in helping build UNICEF to help world help for children. So he really did a lot for this country. And he and his wife then moved to California after he died. He became he wrote books for Stanford. He wrote the textbook on mining that was in use in many universities for many years. He was on the board of directors for Stanford, and they lived in California. The house they lived in near Stanford is now the house that the president of Stanford University lives in. On the grounds of this presidential library and grounds, there are some of his family's in-laws' homes, schools, various things. His father was a blacksmith until he died. And Tad and Bertie, he had a brother and a sister, so he was Tad. Our last set of pictures is our farewell party at Cedar Ridge Winery and Park. And they had a lot of native grasses and flowers out in front, which was kind of fun. We were in fall here, of course, in October. And you could get yourself a glass of wine or a wine tasting if you liked. Marcia, of course, is from Missouri. Some of you met her on other trips with us. And out on the grounds, there are all kinds of sculptures and flowers. They're wire sculptures that are quite interesting. And a stage for outdoor concerts. Their little canopy overlooking over it. And of course, we did our host and ambassador photos, so I'll show you a few of those. Our hosts they were very gracious. We had some really nice hosts. This one turned out to be better than the one that we took there, so I used that one. And our Japanese friends. She was the cutest thing. And this one, Yumiko. She was a lot of fun. They liked Edward. So this is the end of our trip to Iowa. And if you've been putting your questions on chat, we can look at those now and see what you have to ask me. If you want to come back to a gallery view, if you don't have it up, you can come back. What do we have on chat? Oh, we got 14, it says. Wow.
All right, so if you've got a question, I've got two that I'm going to pass on. And if you've got a question, you need to unmute yourself. And so Mary showed there at the very end that we also had 7 people from Japan. So it turned out that the Japanese club from Aichi was going to Madison and then going to Cedar Rapids. We were just going to go to Cedar Rapids, and the lady in Cedar Rapids, Connie Williams, asked me, hey, can we extend this? And I said, sure, why not? Let's do this. So we went to Madison, met the Japanese, and then we went down to Cedar Rapids. The people in Madison took us to Dubuque, where Mary started her presentation. The people from Cedar Rapids, Mary and Marcia Walker met the people in Cedar Rapids, and they all came up and met us there at Dubuque. And then the people from Cedar Rapids took us back from Dubuque. So it was a great coordination. It turns out that they've done that several times, working between those different clubs. So there was one question that, was it?
Yes, a smaller version
Kathy?
of Dallas Heritage Village. I meant to mention that as we went through. But yes, if you've seen the Heritage Village, it's similar to what we have here, where they've moved buildings in to preserve them.
So I think maybe it was Kathy Jacobs asked this. I can't remember who asked it. So why is Cedar Rapids called the city of 5 seasons? So
I could not find the answer
I
to
don't
that.
remember them talking about that when we were
Yeah,
there,
I saw
right?
it in literature online, and I could not ever find the answer to what made it 5 seasons. What's the 5th season?
I'll
So if
tell
anybody
you.
knows the answer to that, tell me.
So who asked that question?
Yeah, I knew somebody would, but I
Leslie.
don't have an answer.
So Leslie, was this a plant? Do you know the answer?
No.
That was me, and I saw it on one of the screens.
Yeah, it is called the City of 5 Seasons, and I
All
don't
right.
know how they figure that.
I don't know.
So what I did a quick little web search, and I literally put in, why is Cedar Rapids called the city of 5 seasons? And the Wikipedia page comes up, and it's called because the 5th season is the time to enjoy the other 4 seasons.
Okay.
And I don't remember seeing this, but it said in this Wikipedia article, the symbol of the 5 seasons is the tree of 5 seasons sculpture in downtown along the North Riverbank. So I don't remember that.
Okay, I don't remember ever seeing that.
And it's like on their logos and media and all kinds of places.
Mm-hmm. I want to say hello to Barbara Ebert, my friend from Virginia. She lived at my house for a couple of years while she was going to SMU, and I go see her when I'm on the East Coast in DC. So it's glad to have you, Barbara.
Right. So she's Barbara's iPhone. There she
Hey,
is. All
there she
right.
is. Hi, Barbara.
Hey, good to see you.
She did come to one of our meetings. She was originally from Germany. She's now an American citizen, but when we had Hamburg come, I believe it was, she came to talk to us about Germany.
Yeah, that's true. I remember. It
Remember
was
that?
very good. I
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah. It's good
Thanks
to have
so
you. I'm
much.
glad you could join us.
Yes, I'm too. Bye-bye.
Oh, you're leaving? All right.
No, I'm not leaving. I'm just muting.
All right.
So
Okay.
Jackie Wald, you wrote, nice to see a taste of home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where did you live in Iowa?
I was born in Marshalltown, Iowa, in the center of the state, but I spent many years in Iowa City, and Cedar Rapids was the first place I ever had my own apartment.
Oh.
And I remember one of my landladies in Iowa City would always go to Kelowna because she would collect little pieces of scrap fabrics and put them all together in a quilt. But for the quilting, she
Yeah.
had a lady in Kelowna that would do the quilting for her, and we always went there and went into the Amana colonies and had these enormous big family style meals. And I've never really spent any time in Dubuque, so it was nice to see that. The only time I was in Dubuque, I'm in one of the frat houses. I think it was the Sweetheart of Sigma Chi Ball. It was on a riverboat thing, and we got in around Dubuque, and we spent like 4 hours with the dance and the dinner dance on this riverboat going all around Dubuque, up and down the Mississippi right there. So that was fun. And as far as West Branch, even when I was a little girl in Girl Scouts, we went to West Branch and camped out there and saw the Herbert Hoover stuff. And before you got to the blacksmith thing, I said, hey, didn't they have Jesse Hoover's blacksmith show? And then you said it.
They do.
So no, I think Iowa was great. I miss being there, and it's a nice, wholesome place to be from, and I still like going back. We were supposed to have my 50th high school reunion like next month, so that's put off for a year. So they're calling it 50 plus 1 in 2021.
Yeah.
So we'll hope it takes place a year from about now, if we
so
can get
too.
the vaccines going in this world and make people safer. So thank you so much for the nice show from Iowa. Loved it.
No, thank you.
Mary, you may want to introduce Wilbur and Elaine from Australia.
Yeah, Arlene. Yeah, they
Marlene, sorry.
It's Marlene, not.
Marlene.
Marlene, okay.
Marlene hosted me in Brisbane. I met her actually when she and Roy came here for a week. They had been to New Orleans and Memphis to see all the good things in Memphis, and we're going to stop some other places. I said, just come to Dallas. There's nothing between Memphis and Dallas anyway. So they came, 2 summers? No, it's got to be longer than that now. Four summers ago, maybe?
Time flies. It's some time ago. Yes. But wonderful. Very, very wonderful memories.
Yes, yes, I think Roy's favorite place was the Fort Worth Stockyard, wasn't it?
Oh, that was unbelievable. Yes.
Yes, we have some good pictures of them from there. Anyway, Marlene hosted me then when our club went to Gold Coast and Sydney 2 years ago. So I came there a few days early and stayed with them. And then of course when we had the day in Brisbane, she was with that group, with the Brisbane hosts.
Yeah, we can normally rely pretty much on our weather. And the days you were here actually poured down. So, and then
Oh, you don't ever have to apologize for weather. Weather is going to be whatever it's going to be. You can't.
We don't even know what wet weather is for the most part. So.
We just take it when we get it. But Iowa had too much. That 31 feet of water was a little bit too much.
Not on.
Too much. It's the Cedar River. I thought somebody might ask me that because I forgot to say that.
Yeah.
The question
always
I
wondered
thought someone
why it
would
was
ask.
Cedar Rapids, Cedar
Pardon?
River. Yeah,
Cedar
they were
River.
saying that, and the way that the city is that it comes along, it drops down, and then comes back up, and this is where the river was, and the major part of the city was in that bowl, and so that's why a lot of the downtown. So she was showing you the pictures of the theater, the Paramount Theater.
Yeah.
So you can imagine almost all the chairs in that auditorium were
Yeah, it's
underwater.
full up.
There was 8 feet of water in the foyer.
And floated
So it
the
was,
organ up onto the stage.
they just said it was just amazing. It was like,
Yeah, it's
but the
pretty
people that we stayed with, they all lived up in the ridge, so they weren't affected, but the
Yeah, my
downtown
parents
area was
weren't
just
either.
completely wiped.
Mhm.
Well, don't forget, everybody, on August the 8th, everything's going to be now on the second Saturday, 3 o'clock. We're going to have a program on the Frankfurt Preservation Society here. It's really an interesting area and a real interesting classical chapel there. And I think it'll be a real neat program. So does anybody have anything else?
Anyone else have questions that they didn't put on chat that they want to talk about? Or you can unmute yourselves. Hello, Sandy.
Oh, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
Thank you. It's great.
Jackie, can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Sandy, go ahead.
Were you in Cedar Rapids at the time of the floods, or was that after you were
It's
there?
2008,
Right, but I don't know when you were in Cedar Rapids.
last fall.
No, Jackie.
Oh, Jackie.
No, gosh, I was in my 20s then.
Oh, you mean, I thought you were only about 30 now.
It was recently, but
Just take it, Jackie. Take it. No,
I don't think Lulu and Jonah would be here if she was 30.
the Iowa rivers do flood a lot. I don't know what they're doing in Cedar Rapids to stop that from happening again.
Well,
Not much. That's the
they're
problem.
diverting water. They're doing levees. They had some other floods since then in 13 and 16, and they saw in 13 where the problems were. And so they did some tweaking to it, and 16 was much better.
Right.
I
So
hope so. But my hometown had some problems. We're on the Iowa River, and they built a beautiful YMYWCA, and that's close to the river, and it got flooded once, and Des Moines and Iowa City. Oh God, yeah,
Yeah.
everything gets flooded when it really pours in the springs.
right.
Well, you
So
remember-
one of the
Do you
things-
have on a bathing suit?
Who?
Sandy Kaiser.
Sandy
Do you
Kaiser.
have on a bathing suit?
No.
You
Mary,
look like you're on a beach.
Mary, do you remember the story about the Field of Dreams?
What about it?
There was an interesting story, if anybody remembers the movie,
Yeah.
that all of the players come out of the cornfields.
Yeah.
And when they were doing it, do a dry season. And
No
the corn did not grow high enough. So they had to come in, lay a false foundation, and build the corn up so that the players could come out of this platform. And if you see some of the pictures there and you look very closely, you can almost see the platform. But it's something you would never see if you were not actually looking for it. But it was.
I didn't ever hear that story, so thank you for adding that.
Yeah, it was interesting how the movie world can change things.
Oh yes, oh yes. Well, even the way it was laid out, the left field and backfield belonged to the people next door, and they didn't want it. They wanted it laid out that way because that's the way they wanted the sun to be, or something like that. You know, they couldn't put it all on one person's property, so they ended up with these two families, both getting tourist centers there to show people. And it was a big mess and all kinds of litigation, and one ended up buying the other one. The major one where we were bought the other one finally. And then they ended up selling it to a private, you know, tourist place. But yeah,
That was all. I just wanted to share that story because
I'm glad you did. I didn't know that.
That was sort of interesting how they had built up the cornfield.
Mm-hmm. And
Well,
if by
I'd just
chance
like
you've never seen
everybody
that,
to-
Mary,
I'd like everybody to know that we had about 28 people, which is about what we usually have when we're at the library.
Yeah.
And we've gone an hour and a half, so I think we should adjourn.
yeah, and we had visitors from Flower Mound, from Warrenton, Virginia, and from Australia. How about that?
Welcome.
All right, great.
Very good. You're all welcome.
So I'm going to go ahead and leave the meeting open. If anybody wants to sit around and chat for a little while, I'll leave it open.
We're gonna.
You're going to go back to bed, right?
You're not wrong.
Thanks, Wilbur and Marlene, for
Good to see you.
attending. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Very interesting. I was most impressed. We'll catch you again.
All
Thanks,
right.
Marlene.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
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 Very good, Mary. Good meeting, Mary.
Yeah, good job.
Well, you know what I keep saying is these little towns in the U.S., don't discount them, because you think, oh, I'd rather go someplace fancy, you know, and big name. And
Well, and they have all kinds of history behind them.
they do.
I
Every
never
place I've
even
been
knew where
has
Herbert
been really
Hoover was
interesting.
from, you know?
So you just never know. I think you're
See
all
you guys later. I'm glad I finally got in.
You have trouble
I've
getting
got-
again, Kathy?
It's about getting in.
Well, Edward's
Seems like
recorded
I
it,
get
so-
in by accident.
Edward's recorded it, so if you maybe you can watch what you didn't get to see. I
Oh,
thought you
that'd
got
be
it by the
good.
time it started. No?
Okay, should we
All
say
right.
bye?
Well, glad everybody came.
Very, very well